The Encyclopedia of Occult Sciences, first part, the Divinatory Sciences. We are so far from knowing all the powers of nature and their various methods of action, that it would be Poe philosophy to deny the existence of phenomena solely because they cannot be explained in the present state of our knowledge. Only we must examine them with an attention the more scrupulous as it seems more difficult to accept them. And it is here that the analysis of probabilities becomes indispensable to enable us to determine the extent to which we must multiply observations or experiments, so as to obtain by means of the powers which they seem to indicate a probability superior to the reasons which we may have for rejecting their existence. The plus, Chapter I, Astrology, I, Historical and General. Our amiable introducer having undertaken the task of vindicating one after another the greater part of the various so-called occult sciences, we shall not enlarge greatly, in the case of each of them, on a demonstration already carried out, being content, by putting in order and collecting into a seeming whole the numerous notes communicated to the writer of the preface, with completing it on certain points, adding to it a few historical sketches and a few remarks and anecdotes, expanding theory and practice as clearly as we are able so as to render this encyclopedia really popular. The reader will already have understood why we begin with astrology, the basis of the deductive divinatory arts. In addition, it is no doubt the art which before any other haunted the first human dreams. Old in fact as the world, dating back to the distant times one when the shepherds guarding their primitive flocks employed the leisure time of solitude by watching the phenomena of nature, and in particular the starry sky, where very soon they discovered an unchanging order and rhythm. Astrology was at the start an amazed and quasi-religious meditation, a vast dream in which slowly principles and laws were sketched out. Little by little these men who, nearer to nature than we are, had an instinct and an intuition perhaps more developed than in our days. 2. 1. It is well known to what distant dates geologists today place back the appearance of human beings on the earth, supposing it to be contemporary with the Quaternary Age, and many think it goes back to the end of the Tertiary. It would already have an existence of 125,000 years. But we must not expect from the still animal outline of primitive man a speculative intellect. It is thought that this outline required 100,000 years to reach the yet very relative civilization of the so-called Mysterian era. It is therefore about 15,000 or 20,000 years that we must date back man having an articulate language, a vague religion he already believed in survival, a few thoughts and consequently a first sketch of astrological science. Men little inclined to credulity, such as Dr. Frumusen, are willing to believe it rather than admit on the other hand a constant perfecting of psychism. The reason for this is that instinct and intuition have decreased in man as the result of the artificial life of civilizations and the development of the centers of reason. And on the other hand, far more diviners, metagnomons, sorcerers, etc., are found among primitive peoples than among the moderns, where these curious personalities are in fact recruited chiefly among people who are worn out or of low culture. And finally, the study of animals shows their admirable understanding of each other without language, their foreknowledge of death, of danger, of particular events. Thought that they observed dim influences emanating from those stars whose progress was so regular. They believed it as the result of numerous observed facts which corroborated each other, and as the result of analogical reasonings, first simple but later more and more complicated. Thus a true science, composed of tradition constantly added to by fresh observations, was formed amongst these wanderers who took as their guides the stars themselves, a science obviously mingled with superstition, with explanations falsified by the failure of the critical mind, although they used this critical mind sparingly, preferring sure experiment to uncertain reasoning, by the lack of our marvelous optical instruments which will be toys in a few hundred years, and also by ignorance of subsequently discovered laws. A religious science, for behind these torches of the night they put the faces of more or less tutelary divinities. A science at bottom confused, vitiated by errors and childishnesses, but yet rich in astounding intuitions, in millions of confirmations, and in all kinds of other knowledge, slowly collected, which little by little became classified. And thus in Nineveh and in Babylon were found in one and the same temple altars erected for the worship of the stars and observatories for the study of their movements. From Asia, where astrology flourished particularly in Chaldea and in India, it spread over the rest of the ancient world: Egypt, Greece, one Rome, the various Mediterranean countries. It would seem that it was the Assyrians who, having for their chief gods the sun and the moon, conceived the zodiac and best described the journey of the two principal luminaries through the 12 constellations, corresponding to a division into 12 months of the complete rotation of the sun round the earth. To it was Greece which gave to the planets early distinguished from the stars, but of which only those were known which are visible to the naked eye, and to the signs of the zodiac the divine or symbolic names which we have preserved even in astronomy. Christianity attacked astrology without, however, denying it, accusing its followers not of imposture but of demonism, which is not astonishing although absurd, seeing that it set free will up against the fatalism with which it wrongly believed this science to be imbued. 3.1 Astrology has been known in Greece since the time of Hesiod and Homer, but it is said that it was Burroughs who brought the Chaldean tradition from Babylon to Athens, whilst Menkhren was bringing it from Egypt. It remains understood that they believed that it was the sun which turned round the earth. But the astrological result of the astronomical truth, which inversely admits the revolution of the planets round their solar center, is absolutely the same. It has been shown in the preface that the Church, whilst making its reservations, does not condemn astrology any longer from the point of view of faith. In the European Middle Ages, after the dark times of the invasions, very eagerly studied astrology, preserved particularly in Italy, which reached its apogee in the 16th century. The names of Nostradamus, Ruggieri, Gauric, Codin, Moore and Villefranche are well known. But already astronomy was arising, although Copernicus, Tycho Brahe, Kepler, Spinoza, Galileo, whilst accepting the new ideas, did not in any way deny a part of the older ones. The two sciences quickly became enemy sisters, as always happens when a tree of belief splits into two branches, one of which attempts to supplant the other, such as Protestantism and Catholicism proceeding from Christianity. On the one hand, some tended towards a science called exact, founded solely on calculation, on positive and renewable experiments, on logical deduction. On the other hand, others did not want to abandon a tradition so rich in analogies, in authorities, in acquired observations. The former thus created a science to some extent official, academic, dogmatic, opposed instead of uniting with it to the old astrology, which was relegated to the rank of divinatory arts, occult, scoffed at, ridiculed. It must be confessed that its experts conduced to the mockery by retaining, perhaps on purpose, a somewhat baroque attitude, a somewhat bizarre vocabulary, a hermetism which, however, was not without pride. Several fell into quackery, and it is not so long ago that it seemed as if astrology were definitely sentenced to remain the bee in the bonnet of a few inoffensive eccentrics, the livelihood of a few old fogies, and an example of popular credulity. But now we find that educated and inquisitive persons, patient searchers, occultists determined to remain sane and clear in mind, united during the middle of last century in thinking that perhaps all was not so childish or so stupid in these century-old statements. One thinking it over, they found that all the so-called occult sciences were connected, held together. They reread the old texts. They tried to clarify tradition. They definitely parted company with the quacks. And finally, bravely, they reconstructed astrology such as true scholars teach and practice it today. To one, astrology had as basis, according to Pierre Piob, an electromagnetic induction of the stars, the mathematical formula of which was published recently. This induction was termed influx. The interplay of the various influxes produces the conditions of life on Earth. Astrology is in short the science of material and psychological determinism. It would seem to be true that it was the Greek Posidonius who, according to Book 6 Leclerc, was the first to give to astrology natural foundations. We must subsequently come down to Morin to find astrology again escaping from the occult ideas. Finally, it is Caslant who in our own time started again on the scientific track on which are engaged men of pure reasoning such as the Polytechnician Corasnerd Paul Flambot. Side by side with him we may mention amongst eminent astrologers of yesterday and today, Hentges, Fomalhaut, Crawford, Mainzier, Selva, Bollet, Brieux, Ely Stahl, although he often uses Kabbalistic methods, etc., etc.